When Barron Trump gave up his first-class seat to an elderly veteran, no one could have predicted the surprising family secret that would unfold mid-flight. What followed left the entire plane in stunned silence. As passengers settled in, the usual mix of anticipation and mild chaos filled the air. It was a brisk morning at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, and Flight 214 Newark was fully booked. Among the crowd was a young man in first class, his face immediately recognizable, though his quiet demeanor suggested he wished it weren't. Barron Trump, now a teenager and towering over 6 feet tall, sat by the window, absorbed in a hardcover book. Unlike other members of his family, Barron rarely made public appearances, but his last name meant attention was inevitable. Exactly the song, Balidimini Kaika. Across the aisle, an elderly man in his late 70s made his way to the economy section. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his gait was slow and deliberate as he clutched his boarding pass and a worn leather duffel bag. Passengers exchanged curious glances as he passed by, his military jacket adorned with faded patches and medals, telling a silent story of service and sacrifice. Some whispered to one another, speculating about his portmanteau's experience. He took his seat at the back of the plane, wedged between a chatty businessman and a restless toddler. Flight attendants moved swiftly through the aisles to ensure everyone was seated for takeoff. Just as the cabin door closed, a ripple of tension spread through the air. The elderly veteran had become visibly upset and requested a different seat. As he apologized for the inconvenience, Barron watched the scene unfold from his first-class seat. Leaning slightly into the aisle, his brows furrowed in thought. Without saying a word, he pressed the call button. "Excuse me," Barron said softly when the flight attendant arrived. "Can I switch seats with the gentleman in the military jacket?" The flight attendant paused for a moment, stunned. Passengers in first class looked up from their newspapers and tablets, intrigued. The young Trump's offer was unexpected, especially in a world where privilege often went unchallenged. Yet, his expression was earnest, and his tone went unchanged. "As some of my partners in mid, let me check," the attendant replied, her voice a bit shaken as she hurried toward the back of the plane. As Barron stood to grab his carry-on, murmurs began to ripple through first class. A woman across the aisle leaned toward him. "You don't have to do that. You know you paid for this seat," she said, her voice tinged with confusion. Barron smiled and shrugged. "Some people deserve it more." The attendant soon returned, her expression a mix of curiosity and admiration. "He said he'd be happy to switch," she informed Barron. "It's not every day someone gives up a first-class seat, especially a teenager with a name like yours." Barron smiled politely, grabbed his bag, and made his way down the aisle. Passengers whispered as he passed, some nudging each other to confirm what they were witnessing, others subtly snapping photos. Barron seemed unfazed by the attention, his focus solely on the veteran now seated in the back. As he approached the elderly man, the veteran looked up, his voice withered but firm. Are you sure, young man? You don't have to do this. I want to, Barron replied, extending his hand. Thank you for your service. Please take my seat. The veteran hesitated, as though debating whether to accept the gesture. But Barron's sincerity was undeniable. Slowly, the man stood, shaking Barron's hand firmly. Well, thank you. That's mighty kind of you. As the veteran made his way to first class, whispers among the passengers grew louder. A young mother in row 15 turned to her daughter and whispered, Did you see that? He just gave up his seat. The businessman next to Barron raised an eyebrow. Never seen anything like that on a flight, he muttered. Barron slid into the now vacant economy seat, adjusting his tall frame to fit the tighter space. He appeared completely at ease, ignoring the stares from other passengers. When a flight attendant passed by and discreetly asked if he needed anything, Barron simply shook his head and returned to his book. In first class, the veteran settled into the plush seat, visibly overwhelmed by the comfort. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the armrest. A flight attendant offered him a complimentary drink and a warm blanket. You should have this seat, she explained. The veteran smiled faintly. It's been years since I've been treated like this, he murmured, glancing back toward the economy section where Barron sat, now absorbed in his book. The small gesture had left a monumental impact. The flight reached cruising altitude, and the soft hum of the engines filled the cabin. Flight attendants moved through the aisles with drinks and snacks, but the atmosphere was far from routine. Passengers exchanged knowing glances, and whispers of admiration spread. The veteran sat quietly at first, sipping his water and gazing out the window, his hands resting on his lap with the faintest tremor. Slowly, they reparted to each other and hissed with more sad. Then, as if compelled by the weight of the moment, he turned to the woman sitting next to him. I have to say something, he began, his voice just loud enough to be heard. The woman looked up, curious. The veteran adjusted a small pin on his lapel. The purple heart and sighed deeply. The young man who gave me this seat. The woman blinked in surprise. What do you mean? The veteran leaned back, his voice growing steadier as he began to tell his story. It was during the Vietnam War. I was stationed overseas, far from home, with no family support. I'd been badly injured, shot twice in the leg. When I finally made it back to the States, I was lost. No direction, no purpose, nothing. His voice wavered, but he pressed on. The woman's eyes widened, and a few nearby passengers leaned in, intrigued. Fred Trump? She asked. The veteran nodded, his expression wistful. Yes, he didn't owe me a thing, but he made sure I had a roof over my head and a job to get back on my feet. He never asked for anything in return, just told me, you served this country, it's the least we can do. I'll never forget those words. By now, the conversation had caught the attention of several passengers, and whispers of the veteran's story began spreading through first class. The veteran's voice grew stronger as he continued, his eyes misting with gratitude. I always wanted to thank his family, but I never got the chance. Life moved on, and I thought that moment was lost forever. And now, today, that man's grandson, he's given me a gift I'll never forget. What are the odds of something like this happening? Christianity has a beautiful way that you must practice in all benefit, because making Camillus Thanos, what word about a Brunford hit so much? The Guruism is something my family aspired to. Life is full of device, and life has so many challenges, and I can only consider. Meanwhile, in economy, Barron sat unaware of the growing buzz. Engrossed in his book, he missed the murmurs and admiring glances directed his way. But in first class, the veteran's revelation had sparked something deeper. One passenger, a man in his early 40s, broke the silence. The veteran nodded, his lips curling into a faint smile. It's the little things, son. People don't realize how far a small act of kindness can go. Across the aisle, a young mother, cradling a sleeping toddler, added, My dad used to say the same thing. He wasn't a veteran, but he always told me that when someone lifts you up, even the veteran listened, his eyes softening as he nodded in agreement. As the flight continued, more passengers shared their own stories, each one more heartfelt than the last. One flight attendant, visibly moved, sat on the armrest of an empty seat near the veteran. I wasn't planning to say anything, she admitted. The veteran nodded, his expression a mix of empathy and quiet pride. Your brother's right. It's the little things that keep you grounded when everything else feels like it's falling apart. In economy, Bjorn noticed a few passengers glancing back at him, their faces filled with awe and gratitude. Though he didn't fully understand the context, he offered a polite nod to one woman who smiled warmly at him. The veteran turned to the flight attendant and said, I've always believed that gratitude doesn't stop with the person who helps you. It grows. Fred Trumbo helped me rebuild my life, and I've spent every day since trying to pay that forward. Today, Barron reminded me of that mission. It's funny how life works, isn't it? Just then, the plane hit a patch of turbulence, jolting everyone slightly. But the mood in the cabin remained steady. The conversations felt like a shared catharsis, a quiet recognition of the power of kindness, gratitude, and human resilience. As the plane began its descent into Newark, the flight attendant approached Barron in economy and knelt slightly to meet his eye level. The plane enjoyed the long flight to Munich. I wanted to let you know that the gentleman you gave your seat to, he shared something extraordinary about your family. Would you like to hear it? Barron looked up from his book, curiosity piqued. Sure, he replied simply. Miniature Kotab. The attendant hesitated before speaking. Years ago, your grandfather, Fred Trump, helped him when he was at his lowest point. He said your grandfather gave him a place to live and a job, expecting nothing in return. And today, you did something for him that reminded him of that kindness. For a moment, Barron didn't speak. His expression softened, as though the weight of the revelation was settling in. Finally, he said, something, isn't it? The attendant smiled. It is. I thought you should know. As the plane touched down, the veteran stood, preparing to disembark. To everyone's surprise, he walked directly to the economy section and scanned the rows until his eyes landed on Barron, who was standing to retrieve his bag. The veteran extended his hand. Young man, I wanted to thank you face to face. What you did today, it brought me full circle. Your family has a history of kindness and you've carried that forward. Never forget how much these moments matter. Barron shook his hand firmly, his voice steady but quiet. I didn't do anything special, sir. You deserved it, which wasn't true. The cabin was silent now, all eyes on the exchange. Some passengers had tears in their eyes, while others wore thoughtful smiles. The connection between these two men, generations apart, felt like a living testament to the power of empathy and gratitude. As passengers disembarked, many paused to thank Barron for his gesture. Others approached the Victorian, offering handshakes and words of gratitude for his service. The mood was unlike anything anyone had experienced on a flight before. At the gate, the veteran turned once more before leaving, tipping his hat toward Barron. You've got a good heart, son. Don't ever lose that. Barron nodded, his usual reserved demeanor softening just enough to show the impact of the words. As he walked toward baggage claim, he pulled out his phone and typed a brief message. He hesitated, then hit send. The text read, Grandpa would have been proud of today. This story serves as a reminder that one small act of kindness can ripple far beyond its moment, connecting people in ways we never anticipate. Kindness, gratitude, and empathy are timeless values that create bonds that endure. If this story inspired you, share it. Let's keep the conversation going and remind the world that kindness still matters. And if you like more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for another unforgettable journey.